I, 32 male, am a software architect. For the last decade, I lived like a monk, ramen, 80-hour weeks, and a tiny studio, while pouring every cent into a cloud security startup. Last year, we exited. I walked away with enough to never work again, but I kept it quiet. My family knew I was doing well, but they didn't know the scale. To them, I was just the reliable ATM for whenever a car broke down or a vacation needed funding. The wedding of the century changed everything. My sister, 26 female, got engaged to a guy who is basically a walking, aspiring influencer stereotype. 2 weeks after the engagement, she sent me a spreadsheet. It wasn't a budget, it was a bill. She wanted $50,000 for a 5-star resort venue and an open bar. When I said no, she went nuclear. My parents called me selfish and a traitor to the family. I stood my ground, told them I wasn't a bank, and they went silent for a month. Then, my sister reached out with a total personality 180. She claimed she wanted to apologize and invited me to a casual dinner at a high-end steakhouse to mend fences. I should have known it was a trap. I showed up, and instead of a menu, I was greeted by a folder. She was sitting there with my parents and 3 lawyers in suits. She told me to sit down and claimed they knew I'd been skimming from a fake family inheritance to fund my business. She handed me a restitution agreement to sign over $500,000 to a trust for her and my parents, or they'd file a complaint for embezzlement and elder abuse. She literally said, "Sign this or I'll ruin you." I told her I wasn't signing a thing because there was no inheritance. Our grandfather died in debt, which I paid off. My sister slammed the table, screaming about offshore accounts and threatening to go to the press. I just pulled out my phone and sent a 1-word text. Now. The doors opened, and my wife walked in with 2 guys carrying briefcases. My wife is a senior partner at a top-tier litigation firm specializing in racketeering and white-collar defense. The look on the faces of those 3 discount lawyers when they recognized her was pure gold. They looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. I handed my sister's lead lawyer a folder. It wasn't just a forensic audit proving there was no inheritance. The last 5 pages were records of every cent I'd given them over the last 8 years, totaling $240,000. Every single wire transfer had demand loan written in the memo line. My wife explained that since they just tried to extort me by claiming this money was an inheritance, they officially acknowledged receiving the funds. By threatening me, they triggered the demand clause. My sister started screaming that it was a joke and that I gave them that money. My wife just smiled and mentioned that if they were gifts, they'd be looking at massive IRS penalties for unpaid gift taxes, but since they were demand loans, they were now due in full. Immediately, my father tried the "we raised you" guilt trip, but I shut that down fast. I told him he brought lawyers to a family dinner to threaten me with prison. That's not family, that's extortion. The 3 lawyers they hired realized they were outgunned and that my sister's retainer check had bounced anyway, so they literally walked out on her. My wife then handed my parents and sister formal notices of acceleration. They had 30 days to pay back the $240,000 plus interest, or we'd garnish wages and put liens on their property, including the house my parents lived in, which I'd provided the $80,000 down payment for as a loan. Then came the first big twist. While my parents were reeling, I dropped a bomb. I had proof that while my sister was helping my parents with their taxes, she tried to transfer the deed of their house into her name alone to cut them out. She was planning to let them live there as guests while she controlled everything. My parents looked at her like she was a stranger. The betrayal in that room was a 2-way street. We walked out, but I wasn't done. My sister's fiancé had been leasing a luxury SUV under a fake business name to look rich on Instagram. A quick tip to the leasing company about the fraudulent application saw the car repossessed 2 days later. Next was the wedding. She'd used my name as a guarantor for the resort by forging my signature. I didn't just refuse to pay. I filed a police report for identity theft. The resort canceled her booking, blacklisted her, and kept her $5,000 deposit as a penalty. When the 30-day clock ran out on the loans, my parents couldn't pay. They'd spent the money on cruises and upgrades my sister talked them into. My wife filed for summary judgment, and we got a lien on their house. They called me crying, asking if I'd kick them onto the street. I told them I wouldn't, but I was foreclosing on the lien and putting the house into a restrictive trust. They can live there, but they have to pay a rent that covers taxes, and the one non-negotiable rule is that my sister is never allowed on the property again. If they let her in or give her a dime, I sell the house the next day. The final desperate move for my sister was a doozy. She sent an anonymous tip to my former company's board and the SEC claiming I'd stolen the code for my startup from a family project. It was a move designed to trigger clawback clauses and cost me millions. What she didn't realize is that I'm a security architect. Every file I've ever created is hashed and time-stamped on a private blockchain. My wife and I filed a countersuit for malicious prosecution and met her in a deposition room with 2 FBI agents waiting. Since my company was a federal contractor, her forged development journals weren't just a lie, they were an attempt to defraud the government. The agents handed her a subpoena, and her influencer fiancé dumped her that afternoon. She ended up taking a plea deal for the forgery and extortion. She's currently serving a short sentence in a state facility. She recently wrote to me asking for commissary money. I didn't send cash. I sent her a transcript of the casual dinner recording from the moment she told me she'd ruin me. I'm not ruined. I'm just finally free of people who saw me as a paycheck instead of a person. My parents stay quiet in the house I own, and I haven't spoken to them in months. Blood might be thicker than water, but it's not thicker than a legally binding contract. If you want more tips on how to professionally dismantle a toxic family tree, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next update.